Good day, everybody. I hope that you're well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 1 English lesson on sentence parts. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts, grade 1, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of sentence parts. All right. So chapter is sentence parts. Our subject is English language arts. Grade 1. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of sentence parts is it a naming or action part of a sentence? So is it a naming or an action part of the sentence? All right. So every sentence, right, it has a naming part and it has an action part. So every sentence has a naming part and it has an action part, right? So a naming part, right, is it's like your nouns, right? It's like naming either people, it's naming things, it's naming animals, right? That is a naming part. And then it also has an action part, right? And an action part, it basically tells us it's like the verb, right? It's the action that takes place within that sentence. All right. So when it comes to a sentence, right, then we say that every sentence it either has a naming part or every sentence has an action part, meaning that in a sentence, right, to show a complete sentence, and then we need to show that there is, it's basically telling us who or what is doing something, and also the action that that person or thing is doing. So we said every sentence it has a naming part as well as an action part, right? The naming part, it tells us either who or it tells us what the sentence is about. Can be about Jane, can be about Amy, can be about John, can be about the dog, right? And if we look at an example, right, it says the dog eats a bone. So the dog eats a bone. So if we were to identify the naming part within that sentence, right, either tells us who or what the sentence is about, and then we would say that our sentence is about, it's about the dog, right? It's about the dog. If we look at the next sentence, it says that airplane is big. So that airplane is big. So now we need to ask ourselves who or what the sentence is about. So that airplane is big. And if we were to identify who or what the sentence is about, then we would say it's that airplane. And the next sentence is Jim is happy, right? So if you look at that sentence, we need to ask ourselves who or what the sentence is about. And then we can say it's Jim. And then we have an action part, right? And the action is a doing thing or doing word, right? And the action, it tells something about the naming part. It tells us about the naming part, right? The action part can tell what the naming part does. So, what the naming part does, the action that the naming part does. And it can also tell what the naming part like. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be like, what the naming part does, but also name it what the naming part like. For example, the dog eats a bone. So the dog eats a bone, right? We see that the dog is the naming part. So now what is the naming part doing? And we can say he eats, or we can say eats a bone. And that airplane is big, right? And we can just say big. Jim is happy. Happy is our that's basically the action part. All right. So if we're going to, so if we look at both of these, basically these concepts, right, which is the naming part as well as the action part, literally in every sentence, we will have a naming part, and in a sentence, we will have a action part, right? Because within a sentence, right, in order to show a completed sentence, and then we need to show a naming part. A sentence needs to have a naming part as well as an action part. And during the course of the lesson, we are going to find out more about how to identify the naming parts and how to identify also the action parts within a sentence. All right. And we're going to go to aplusstudents.ca, and that is where we're going to continue with our tutorial lessons, right? All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca. We said our chapter is sentence parts. And is it a naming or an action part of a sentence? All right. And once again, we said every sentence has a naming part and every sentence has an action part. And we said the naming part, it tells us who or what the sentence is about. And we looked at these three sentences and we said the dog eats a bone. And we said that the naming part, right, that tells us either who or what the sentence is about, and we had identified the dog. And the second sentence, that plane or that airplane is big. And we identified who or what the sentence is about, and it was about that airplane. And then also the next one says Jim is happy. Who is happy or what is happy? Jim is happy. And we then say that the action part within the sentence, right, that basically tells us what the naming part does or what the naming part like. And we said the action part, it tells us either what the name, it tells us about the naming part, what the naming part does, and what the naming part is like. For example, the dog eats a bone. Remember, we identified already that the naming part is the dog. So now what the dog either does or the dog is like. So what the dog likes, does, sorry, we can say the dog eats a bone. So eats a bone tells us what the dog does because he eats a bone. That airplane is big. So is big is our action part. Jimmy is happy. What is Jimmy like? He's happy. So is happy is our action part. Yes, well done. Happy is correct. But remember, is happy is the correct word. Right? So well done. So now we're going to first look at a few activities before we go on to our test. All right, so it says look at the word, look at the part of the sentence in bold. All right, we need to say if that is a naming part or we need to say if it's an action part. Bees make honey. Bees make honey. So the word bees, is that a naming part or is it an action part? So we need to say if it's a naming part or action part. So the word bees, is that a naming part or an action part? So the word bees, is bees a naming part or is bees an action part? Does bees tell us who or what the sentence is about? Or does bees, the word bees, tell us what the naming part does or what the naming part is like? All right, and if we were to select the correct part, right, then we would say bees, right? It is a naming part. I'm going to circle naming part, which means that it is not an action part. It is a naming part because it either tells us who or tells us what the sentence is about. And the sentence is about bees. And what do bees do? They make honey. All right. So bees is our naming part. All right. Mom and dad buy eggs. Mom and dad buy eggs. So we need to look at this words buy eggs. Is this a naming part or do we say it is an action part? So is that a naming part or is it an action part? Which one is correct? The word buy eggs, that words. Is that a naming part that tells us either who or what the sentence is about, or an action part that either tells us what the naming part does or what the naming part is like? All right, so if we were to choose between the naming part or an action part, right, then the word buy eggs, right, it is an action part because it tells us what mom and dad does. So it tells us what mom or dad does, right? They buy eggs. Where do they buy eggs? They can buy eggs by the shop. They buy eggs at the marketplace or at the market, but they buy eggs, right? So it's an action part. Now we need to look at the next one. It says grandpa. Grandpa heard some loud noises. So the word grandpa, is grandpa a naming part or is grandpa an action part? So is grandpa a naming part or is grandpa an action part? So grandpa, does it tell us either who or what the sentence is about, or does it tell us what the naming part does or what the naming part is like? Grandpa. All right, and if we were to choose the correct sentence part, right, then we would say it is a naming part because it either tells us who the sentence is about, right? It is about grandpa, right? It is about grandpa, and grandpa was the one who heard some loud noises. So grandpa is our naming part. That is what the sentence is about. All right, so now we're going to our test, right? Where we are going to say is it the naming part or if it's an action part of a sentence. Just like we have identified now in the activities that we did. So we need to look at the word or the word, or let's say look at the part of the sentence that is in bold. And then we need to say if that word or part of a sentence is either a naming part or an action part. So the word bees, we need to say if bees, if it's a naming part or if it's an action part. Bees. So look at the word bees. Is that a naming part or an action part? Option one or option two? All right, so bees, we would say, is a naming part. It tells us either who or what the sentence is about. So, naming part is then our answer. Our dog barks at squirrels. Our dog barks at squirrels. We need to say if that is a naming part or if it's an action part. So, our dogs, is that a naming part or is that an action part? Our dog. All right. And if we look at the word our dog, right, then we can say our dog is a naming part because it either tells us who or what the action is about. So it is about our dog. These shoes make funny noises. So these shoes make funny noises. So the words make funny noises, is that a naming part or an action part? So make funny noises, is that a naming part or if it's an action part? And if we look at the make funny noises, then we can say it is an action part, right? Because the shoes is a naming part. And what does the shoes do? It makes funny noises. So it is an action part of a sentence. Robin found a penny. So Robin found a penny. Is that a naming part or an action part of a sentence? Found a penny. And if we select the correct part, we would say it is an action part. So found a penny is an action part. It's something that he got. And then Sam painted all the doors. What did Sam do? What did he do? Right? So is it the naming part, painted all the doors, or is it an action part where he painted all the doors? And the words painted all the doors is an action part. So we can say that it's an action part of a sentence, right? All right, one more. The men fix the truck. So the men fix the truck. So the words fix the truck, we need to say if that is a naming part or if it's an action part of a sentence. And fix the truck, it basically tells us what the men are doing. So it means that that is an action part. It tells us what the men are doing. Right? Remember, we said that a naming part, it tells us either who or what the action is about or the sentence is about. And then the action part, it tells us either who or what does the action, right? Within a sentence, what the naming part does or what the naming part is like. All right, so now we're going to aplusclasses.ca. Once you've gone to aplusclasses.ca, we're going on learning materials. We're going on reading. Then we're going to scroll down up until we get to those four beautiful purple boxes. Not the first, second one, and we're going to read along audiobooks level 1. Right? And since it is spring, almost summer, let us go to We Live on an Island. Right? And with these audiobooks, right, you will be able to follow what the person or how or what the person reads instead of just reading it on your own. So you'll be able to hear either how the words are either pronounced, right? And also you'll be able to follow based on what the person reads. Mhm. I'm not sure why it's not playing because my thing is loud. Can you guys hear it from your side? Let's check another one. Maybe it's only that one. Let's check another one.
World Oceans Day by Samantha Makowicz.
All right, let's go to this one. Seeing that this one is also to do with the beach. Because it's going to be summer soon, right? Which means that you guys will probably be going to the beach, right?
Did you know that June 8 is World Oceans Day? On this day, we celebrate the ocean like your friends and family celebrate your birthday. Just like you, the sea is special for many reasons. The ocean covers most of the earth. Many animals, from tiny fish to huge whales, make their homes under the waves. Have you ever seen a dolphin in the ocean? There are many different ocean homes beneath the beautiful blue waters, from colourful coral reefs and magical kelp forests to the icy wonderlands of the Arctic and Antarctic. Half of all the people on Earth live near the ocean. Even if you cannot see the ocean from your home, you are connected to the sea. Most of the air you breathe comes from the sea. Ocean plants make oxygen to help people like you and me stay healthy. Many people in the world rely on the ocean for food. Every day, people go fishing for their families. Have you ever tried fishing before? You can also visit the ocean to have fun. You can build a sandcastle, surf in the waves, take a boat ride, or simply enjoy the blue sea that never stops moving. The ocean needs our help to keep it clean and healthy. No matter where we live, we can be respectful of the ocean and the animals that call it home. All around the world, people celebrate World Ocean Day by showing the ocean that we care. How will you celebrate the ocean?
All right. So that is our first story about World Ocean Day, right? And it spoke about basically the benefits, the good things about the ocean, right? They gave us perks about the ocean and also what the ocean is used for, right? So when it comes to reading these audio books, right, only be able to, what you can do is you can then follow based on where the person is reading, right? And then you will also be able to hear how the words are pronounced or the pronunciation of the words. Pardon. Right? All right, we're going to do one more reading and then we are going back to our tutorial lesson. All right, let's do time. No, let's go. Let's ride. So we're going to read another story about Let's Ride.
Let's Ride by Jordan McGuffey. Class first. Don't forget your helmet. Look ahead. Elbows up. Sit forward. Pin it on the straightaways. Roll off in the corners. Stand up for all the jumps. Then you will be The fastest kid on two wheels.
All right, so that is the two books that we have read, two audio books. Remember, you can always go to aplusclasses.ca, go to reading, scroll right down up until you get those four beautiful purple boxes. Go to audiobooks level 1, and there you will find all the different kinds of audiobooks, right? That will be able to help you to read and pronounce certain words. All right, so we said that so we were still talking about parts as well as action parts. And we said within a naming part of a sentence, it tells us either who or what the sentence is about. Can either be about the person, can be about the place, it can be about an animal, a thing. And then we have an action part, right? And that is something that is it tells us what the naming part does, or it tells us what the naming part is like, right? So it gives us the action, not just the action word, but the action phrase within that sentence. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on naming parts as well as action parts, right, which is sentence parts. Thank you very much, grade ones, for joining the class. And I really hope that you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.